Today, there are thousands of women who work as doctors in the UK, but 150 years ago, there were no female doctors. This is the story of one of the women who fought for the right to work in medicine in England. Her name is Elizabeth Garrett Anderson. Elizabeth was born in London in 1836. When she was 5, her family moved to a small seaside town called Aldeburgh. There, her father became a successful businessman and they built a big house, which was just as well as Elizabeth had lots of brothers and sisters. When Elizabeth was 13, she went to a boarding school in Kent. Here, she made friends with other young women. They were all starting to think about their futures. At this time, women like Elizabeth were expected to get married and stay at home with their children. Elizabeth, though she knew she wanted to go out and work, she just didn't know what type of work she wanted to do. This all changed when she met Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to study for a medical degree in America. This inspired Elizabeth to study medicine too, but no woman had ever done this in Britain. How could she do it? Lots of medical schools rejected Elizabeth, but eventually she found somewhere that allowed her to study, not as a doctor, but as a nurse. After lots of hard work, she passed an exam which allowed her to practice medicine. She still didn't have a medical degree, but this did mean that Elizabeth was able to have her name listed in the medical register. Despite this, Elizabeth still wasn't allowed to work in a hospital as a doctor, simply because she was a woman. This didn't stop her though. She decided to set up her place where she could see patients, offer them help, and give them medicine. It was called a dispensary. All of her patients were women and children. At this time, it wasn't acceptable for a woman to look after a male patient. After a few years, women were still not allowed to study medicine in the UK, but Elizabeth heard that women were allowed to study medicine at a university in Paris. With the support of the French Empress, she was given permission to study for these exams in London, where she continued to work. In 1870, she travelled to Paris to sit the final exams, passing them all, even though they were in French. Now that she had a medical degree, Elizabeth became even busier. She started to work at a big London hospital, as well as expanding her own dispensary, which she renamed the New Hospital for Women. In 1872, Elizabeth was admitted to the British Medical Association. It would be 20 years until another woman was allowed to join. As well as this, Elizabeth still found time to get married and have children of her own. Elizabeth had broken down barriers to become a doctor. Now, she wanted to help other women do the same. She gave lectures to students at a new school of medicine for women, wrote a medical textbook, and donated money to women's education. Elizabeth also joined the suffragettes and campaigned for women's right to vote, alongside her sister, Millicent Fawcett, one of the leaders of the movement. Even in retirement, Elizabeth Garrett Anderson stayed busy. When she was in her 60s, she moved back to the seaside town where she grew up and became the first ever female mayor. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson once said, "The passion of my life is to help women." She certainly achieved this, breaking down barriers for all women in medicine who came after her.